Welcome to the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast. Join host Jimmy Young as he dives into the pulse of the cannabis industry, featuring weekly guests who break down big topics like standardization, evolving regulations, and exclusive member spotlights. Get informed, get inspired. And now, here's your host, Jimmy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast. I'm Jimmy Young. This podcast is made possible through the support of Buds Group, a group of consultants in the tri-state area of New York that handle every aspect of the cannabis industry, from accounting to compliance, plus the Maverick PR Group out of Colorado. Today, we thank the Maverick PR Group for introducing us to today's guest. His name is Daniel Cook. He is the CEO of TruCo, or True Terpenes. And if you know anything about the cannabis industry, you know that scientists are discovering the magic of all these cannabinoids in this plant. While THC and CBD are probably the most well-known cannabinoids, there are hundreds more, and the extraction of those chemicals that allow gummies to be made in all sorts of other concentrates, flavor in flower. And today we talk with a guy who is leading this industry into its next phase of development by creating sensory journeys to enhance the human experience. Daniel Cook, welcome to the Voice of Cannabis, the NCIA's regular podcast that I get to be the host of. And I congratulate you on your success, sir, after reading your bio and what you've done, not only with the TruCo company and True Terpenes, but with a whole bunch of other stuff that you've been involved with as well. And all I can tell you is I'm really looking forward to talking with you because you know wine, you know weed, and you know business.
Yes, Jimmy. Thanks for the intro and thanks for the invite. Glad to be here today.
We're in a very critical time in the cannabis industry right now. As you know, we've got a legacy market, we've got a hemp market, and we've got a legal, overregulated, unfair market, if you will. Where do you see the industry going in 2026? There's so much debt service that comes due, and there's so much movement amongst the MSOs in merger and acquisitions. What can we take the temperature of the cannabis industry through your eyes?
Yes. So I got to True Terpenes 6 years ago, and the temperature is a lot different 6 years ago than it is now. I'd say it's much more realistic, high levels of discipline, realism, a little bit of fatigue for sure. We've been at this for a while. And but I would say some optimism. I'm optimistic about the future. I'm optimistic about the progress. We had the most significant, steps forward on regulatory change in 50 years. Now, it's not the end of the road, but it is progress, and I'm optimistic about that. So hope to keep building on that momentum. And what we do is really help our clients survive the jungle that is the cannabis market, and really increase their probability for success.
And how did you pick? How did you pick terpenes to get involved with on the whole cannabis industry? And I'm going to guess that having something to do with the tannins in wine got you intrigued a little bit, because there is a correlation between both of those items, correct?
Correct. Yes, big correlation between the wine world and cannabis. Terpenes and these wonderful aromatic compounds found in the cannabis plant, really, it's an amazing innovation platform. We help shape the experience of over $8 billion worth of cannabis products each year. And not only the terpenes, but the other aromatic molecules like the esters, the thiol, the aldehydes, all contribute to what makes cannabis cannabis and what differentiates one strain from another strain. And so it's an interesting vantage point and pole position to be in to see what's happening in the industry and really influence the outcome and success of a lot of products and a lot of brands. In terms of wine, there are a lot of parallels. There's some differences as well, but there's a lot of parallels. You're talking about, curating a very gentle, fragile plant in the field, whether it's strains or whether it's varietals, each has its own character. And through that careful cultivation and craft, you're trying to achieve the truest, highest level of expression from that plant. And I think that is the primary parallel between those two worlds.
And defining a terpene, and this was one of the first things I asked 8 years ago when I started doing these podcasts, and now over 1,000 interviews with people. The terpenes are the steering mechanisms that give the plant its flavor and its effect. Accurate definition? Would I pass the test?
You'd pass the test, Jimmy. It is. We do say it's the steering wheel. Cannabinoids may be the engine, but terpenes, along with these other compounds, these aroma compounds, really shape the experience and get you to where you want to go. And so yes, I think that is very accurate. I think what we underestimate is the power of aroma, and it is aroma that really drives that experience.
And
yes.
There's another comparison with wine, because you smell the wine ideally before you taste, correct? So there's that. You better have a good nose, a good sensory in your nose to actually pick up some of the nuances in both products.
Absolutely. Aroma is, for us, it's the most undervalued, underestimated of the human senses. And it's the only one that takes a superhighway right to your brain. And it really connects immediately in seconds with nostalgia, pleasure, anticipation, memory. The other senses don't do that on that direct superhighway. So aroma is not to be underestimated, and it really does, drive that experience. And whether it's a Cabernet from a Merlot, or whether it's a Kush from a Diesel, really it differentiates one from the other. If you didn't have your sense of aroma, you have a monochromatic world where all wines or all cannabis would really taste the same.
And I'm not the most discerning user of the plant medicine, let's just say, because I grew up in the 70s. Okay. And back then, does it get you high or doesn't it? Is it 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits? And if you're not high after 4 hits, don't smoke it anymore. That's kind of how. And now I enter the world of flower. And when I got my medical card in 2013 in Massachusetts, and you walk in, and I didn't flower. I was like, yeah, I guess it is a flower. Okay, great. But that's the brain. That's where we were. And now, of course, I've learned quite a bit about it. I didn't even know, by the way, that there was a male plant and a female plant. That alone was enlightening to me. And that was the grower at that solar place, that Solar Therapeutics, that I visited back in the day. What the thing about the plant and these cannabinoids, everyone knows the THC, the intoxicating cannabinoid. They know CBD as the non-intoxicating cannabinoid that has medical benefits. And of course, that CBD is becoming, I will give President Trump credit for recognizing the medicinal value of CBD in his Dog and Pony show a few months ago, when he signed an executive order. Let's just leave it at that, because my friend Jamie Pearson had a great description of what that whole Dog and Pony show was about. It was a big nothing burger.
No.
And that being said, I've never seen a president of the United States come out and say, you know what, it shouldn't be on Schedule 1. It needs to be moved. And whether he knows what Schedule 3 is, and whether we rewrite the Controlled Substances Act, which is really what needs to happen here, and deregulating this plant would be the best thing for the industry, and let the people that know the plant best kind of run it and regulate it, as opposed to what's happened in our government, because that farm bill opened up a Pandora's box. They had no clue what they were doing when they they defined a legal definition of cannabis at 0.3% THC. Yeah. And now here we are.
Yeah, no, it was the absence of regulation. It was a loophole. It wasn't really regulation. Mm-hmm. Something had to fill that loophole. I think it's, in terms of moving to Schedule 3, ideally, it's just one more stop in the journey. I don't think it's the end of the road, and there's still a lot of work to do. Right. But I do think it's positive movement forward. And I know there's uncertainties and some anxiety around it. But for us, again, we're optimistic about where we're going.
And it says, as I look at some of the materials that I've been poring over for the last few days, okay, the next era of cannabis flavor: science, consistency, and scale. Explain that.
Sure. When we talk about, back to aroma, and you talk about some of the different compounds that influence the aroma in cannabis, you're talking about these very light, very fragile compounds that go airborne very quickly. And if you don't care for those compounds, then every step of that plant's journey from from field to shelf, you really lose what makes cannabis distinctive, and you really lose the potency of the plant and the experience of the plant. And so for us, we've really been on a journey ourselves to get close to the plant, to understand from the lens of sensory, from the lens of aroma, what happens to those molecules that could be found at parts per million, parts per billion, very small amounts, but that really disproportionately influence what you experience as pleasure, with cannabis. And so for us, a lot of the future really is that fidelity, that true fidelity to the flower, harnessing and capturing those aroma molecules and making sure that when the consumer or the patient experiences that, they get that full spectrum, that full range of aroma compounds that drive pleasure and connectivity to the plant. So for us, it's it's a supply chain challenge, it's a product formulations challenge, it's a packaging challenge, educational challenge, but it's the most important thing of really making sure that we get the highest expression, highest value from the plant.
And when you're playing with the chemistry, which is not something in a million years I ever expected, my friends who had to take organic chemistry in college, I was like, oh, I'm not going anywhere near that. And now here I am talking about chemistry and science and botany and some of the smartest people I've ever interviewed in my past, because I was in the sports world. And in the sports world, when you're dealing with humans and you're looking at performance, okay, consistency is really the key that every coach wants out of his players to execute what they've worked on and exemplify their strengths. So I always use the analogy of sports. And in cannabis, consistency is important as well. How is it that you can extract what you need and then produce a product that is a good controlled product to share with the public? I mean, isn't that a huge challenge?
Huge challenge. I agree with you. I think consistency, repeated outcomes, and managing expectations is how you build trust. And it's essential for brands to be sustainable and to scale up over time. They have to maintain that trust. And you have to deliver that same experience that you initiated with, and which is very hard to do. So for us, the way we look at it is we really care for and we reintroduce some of those volatile components that are lost through either the harvest process, through heat, through oxygen, through light. Again, they're very delicate. And so you really have to have this kind of, ground level visibility and connection with the product as it progresses through that supply chain. And, as you lose some of these compounds, you have to make sure that they're able to come back into the product, because if you lose them completely, you will not have consistency. And so for us, it's really looking at quality control, quality assurance from a sensory lens, and bringing that sensory evaluation to each part of your operational process and each part of your value chain, right? Cultivation, harvesting, cold chain management, extraction, product formulation, product packaging, product warehousing, product shipping. You have to understand the conditions on the ground that can influence the quality of your product and be ready to make and ensure that the full range of compounds that create that experience will be present when that end consumer, that end patient experiences cannabis.
There's no book that you could take out from the library and learn this either. You guys have to learn by doing right now. And it's an exploratory and exciting time because there's always new cannabinoids being discovered. And I look at your some of the items here about the science behind the real flavor. And I see two terms, hand harvesting and fresh freezing. Can you explain what role those play, please? And make them, dumb them down for the jock in the room, okay?
You got it, Jimmy. So if you look behind me, that was 100. That's what 100 acres of type 3 hemp look like. So low THC burden, very high aromatic profile. So a lot of the popular strains that you would know in cannabis, that's what we cultivated in Washington State. And managing 100 acres, the reason people went through this gargantuan task of hand harvesting was because a lot of the machine-driven techniques, right, would really damage some of those aromatic volatile compounds we're trying to maintain.
Gotcha.
and you would lose that essence, that character of the plant. And so the reason we were hand harvesting at such large scale and then freezing was to retain the integrity of that plant. Now it's a very difficult, challenge. We worked over 5 years on perfecting this journey, on getting close to the plant, understanding how it reacts under different conditions, and how these molecules, these aromas, right, can be maintained at each stage. And so it was a lot of trial and tribulation, but it was the learning. It put us in the position we're at today to be able to make the products that we do for our clients.
Hey, you want to walk me through some of your products, really? Because I'd really like to know, which are the ones that you like, and where do you think the future is with developing some of these products?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, the most exciting new launch that we have, we just launched less than a month ago, about 3 weeks ago. It's called Head Stash. And Head Stash is a live spectrum extract that reintroduces some of these aroma compounds that we're talking about, the thiols, the esters, the aldehydes, the ketones, along with the terpenes and full spectrum HTE, which has some of the cannabinoids, and really puts it into this kind of turnkey plug and play blend that our clients can use as bases, right, for vape, for pre-rolls, for concentrates primarily. And what's exciting about this is we've launched 5 of these bases to start. We have another 8 on the way in Q2. It's Kush, Perp, Haze, Diesel, and Gelato are the ones that we have now. But when you combine those 5 with our portfolio of other terpene flavors and strain flavors, you have this infinite, opportunity to innovate by combining. And let's say you combine up to 5 blends, right? We're going to get up to 20 bases, and let's say you combine up to 5 in a blend, right? With our other 500 flavors, you're talking about over 50 billion potential combinations, right, that you can create. And so when you talk about the range and the room for innovation, it's infinite. It's more than we'd have time to do. It's more than there are people on Earth, right? And so, the real trick is going to be in curation. You have that opportunity to go as far as you want and imagine anything that you can kind of dream up and create, right? But the real trick is going to be, how do you curate that portfolio and really hit demand and really hit what people are looking for?
Therein lies the challenge for your company. I mean, it is to predict the future of the market. This is one of the things I talk to people about that are in the industry, and I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that most people go into a dispensary, they look at the various things on the menu, and they go down the THC percentages, and they pick the highest percentage of THC. Okay. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's what they do. And again, to me, it's like, well, you obviously need to educate yourself, because it really has more to do with the terpenes dictating the impact of that varietal, if you will, to use a wine term, and what impact it's going to have on you. And here's the biggest challenge. Every human's different. Okay. It's what affects you in a relaxing state may be stimulating for me. And again, I don't know how we're ever going to educate all the a couple billion people on Earth on how this plant works. And we've seen examples in our government basically showing that they have no clue on how this plant works. And that is always my biggest concern, if you will. And of course, what's the first thing you do when you don't understand something? You ban it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really not how it should work, especially when you're talking about an infant industry that's already in the billions, and you're still just scratching the surface of the potential of where this can go. So there's a challenge at every corner in this industry, and you're right in the middle of it. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And yes, I agree with you. You don't ban it. You have to study it.
Right.
And I think one of the disadvantages of the adverse regulatory environment that we've had for decades now is it's been hard to study. It's been hard to study it. And more research is starting to come out that shows that aroma is what drives experience. It's not just THC. Not that THC is unimportant. It's very important,
Yep.
right? But what's been undersold, what's been undervalued is really the aroma. And we're seeing time after time, and we've been involved in some of these studies, that is what drives pleasure, is the aroma. It's not purely levels of THC.
Right.
And for businesses, that's a good thing to understand that, and to understand how aroma drives the experience, because that is a much easier area to differentiate in. Differentiating on a THC percentage, it's a race to the bottom. You'll all become commodities and compete on a number. And that's no sustainable way to do business. You won't defend margins, you won't create anything differentiated, and you'll be right in the middle of that hyper-competitive market. But with aroma, understanding the experience and building trust in repeatable, scalable ways, that is how you will separate from the pack. And so studying aroma is a huge part of that. And it's something that later this year, we're going to be launching some new studies that we're supporting to look at that precisely.
Very cool. And, it's funny, whenever I hear aroma, I think of a certain governor of a certain state who hates the aroma of cannabis. And you're grinning, so I'm going to guess you think you know what it is. It's Ron DeSantis of Florida, okay? He's got the biggest medical monopoly of Trulieve down there, and more medical patients in that state than any other. And you've got a governor who hates the smell of cannabis. I mean, he's come out and said, I hate it. You know what? And yet he hasn't smelled it all. He just thinks it's that skunky, weed smell that is not really disgusting as much as it is. It takes a while to appreciate it, that sort of thing. Like, I happen to like the aroma of any plant like that, to be honest, but he doesn't, and it impacts his policy, as you know. I'm holding in my hand the handout by a group of friends of mine in the Massachusetts area, the Alternative Wellness Centers of America, and they have this little thing, this little flip chart, okay, and it has all the terpenes in it.
Yeah.
Okay? So if I said, and one of the things I've done in the past on these talk shows is, if I give them this, okay, pronounce this word, right? Because in terpenes, this is quite a challenge. I mean, is it fenchol? Fenchol, F-E-N-C-H-O-L, benefits, antibacterial, antioxidant, pain relief.
Fenchol, yeah.
Fenchol. See, I knew I did it wrong. All right. Linalool.
That's
Linalool?
from lavender.
Right? I mean,
and the way to think about, Jimmy, the way to think about the terpenes is these are some of the most powerful compounds found within plants. Yeah. And when you walk through a forest and crush pine needles under your shoe, or when you peel an orange, right? Those are what you're smelling. Those are the terpenes. And what's interesting about those terpenes and some of these other aromas, it's not just the scent; it's also the effect that they can have. It goes right to the brain. Right. Linalools from lavender, right? Which it often has these curative, relaxing effects, right? If you've heard about forest bathing in Japanese culture, that's from pinene, which is from pine trees. So when you walk in the forest and you have that, groundedness and that clarity, that is from that terpene, that is from that experience. And so what's fascinating about this, it's not just the orangey taste or the floral taste, but it's also the ways that this impacts and regulates the human brain.
You talk about research and studies now, and certainly we all want as much knowledge as possible to be shared with the public. But I'm in the media, and they will not take a public service announcement that is a pro-cannabis public service announcement. They won't. It's against the rules, and everyone, it's a federally illegal substance still, and technically we both know it is. Okay, how are we ever going to educate the public? President Trump posted that public service announcement about CBD and Medicare, and it freaked me out, because I'm like, this is what the industry needs. We need more education about what the endocannabinoid system is and how this plant interacts with something that is in our bodies. Every mammal has an endocannabinoid system. And yes, we both recognize that it impacts people differently. And now you're adding in terpenes, and you're adding in all sorts of other things that you need to make this work. And then this is leading into the entourage effect. okay, where you need a little THC to maximize the impact of the other cannabinoids in the plant, right?
Okay.
How do terpenes work within that whole ecosystem? I mean, they all have to work together, obviously, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The terpenes, again, work in terms of the functional effects, and what we know today
Mm-hmm.
is that they work to shape aroma.
Right.
Aroma doesn't bypass through reasoning, right? It doesn't bypass like other senses through your rational thought process.
Correct.
It goes right to the brain. It goes right to the heart of emotion, nostalgia, memory, and human physiology. And so the first and foremost way that aroma and terpenes shape impact and experience, right, is through that pathway right there. The entourage effect is like a multi-compound theory that these compounds plus these compounds equal an effect. That's something we'd love to see a lot more research on, a lot more data on. And so I think, ideally, one of the things that will happen with the shifting, regulations is that medical study will open up more, and we'll have easier access to data and a way to kind of build this body of knowledge going forward. Even the study of aroma has been ignored for centuries. The study of aroma really started 20 years ago when the Nobel Prize was awarded for studying the molecular foundation for aroma and how that impacts human physiology.
Huh.
And so since that Nobel Prize award a couple decades ago, it's really ramped up. But I think the study of aroma, along with the study of cannabis and the compounds found in cannabis, I think is a really interesting time to see what that produces over the next decade.
And what's happened in the last year or so is these prohibitionists coming out of Washington, D.C., are looking at the same research and studies that the pro-cannabis community has looked at as well, and they're spinning the same results to fit their narrative. So yes, we need more research, but how did they have money? The prohibitionists have money, and they're fighting against the advocates of the normals and the MPPs and the NCIAs and all the people in Washington, D.C. who are trying to impact policy. And yet I still see there's still not enough money going into that cause, because that's how our American system works.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm not sure where my question is on this. Is I'm concerned about the future, given the fact that one side has what I think, I don't know, I'm not going into who has more money than the other. They have money enough to impact policy. Yeah. That's the key, whatever that figure is. And how do you combat what's going on? And you've also got this single plant that has a legacy hemp and regulated cannabis market. So, will we ever get to the point where we're all worried about one plant, one set of regulations?
I hope so, Jimmy. I really hope so. It's absurd that there's separate sets of regulations for what is exactly the same plant. It makes no rational or scientific sense whatsoever. So no, I hope we do see that future. As we know, for the kind of machinery of regulation governments to move, it takes time. And if you look back historically on prohibition of alcohol, not that it's the equivalent of cannabis, we know that it's not the equivalent. Mm-hmm. However, interesting to look at the regulatory history of that, because even after they repealed prohibition, made it federally legal, it still took the states years and years and years to figure out their own regulations.
Right.
So it's never happened overnight, and it won't happen overnight here. I think there's a lot of fatigue, within the cannabis world, because so many people have fought for so long, right, to make this right. And, it's never enough progress soon enough. But I still believe, we are moving. It's never fast enough, but we are moving. I think we're gaining progress, and I'm optimistic that this will continue. And I do believe that there's, if we're just to look at economics, I believe there's massive economics here. I think there are groups that will want to see this move forward, whether it's from the beverage world or the wellness world or others. I do think they're, powerful forces on both sides.
Are we going to see big pharma, big alcohol, or big alcohol, big pharma, or there's another one. Just say, who's going to end up controlling the direction of the industry? And there are so many people, the mom and pop stores, the home growers out there, they're so fearful of big pharma coming in and controlling it. And of course, moving to Schedule 3, it's still controlled substance and still illegal at the federal level. Who's going to emerge here? Do you have any idea, or we still don't know?
I think it's bigger than, one group or one industry just controlling it. And just like with wine, I think this is bigger than wine. This is bigger than alcohol long term. It has a lot more range. It plays in a lot of different worlds, whether it's adult use or wellness or more purely medical. And that's not something that alcohol or tobacco obviously have. So I think there's just so many arenas here you can play in. And I think there will always be a demand for craft. I think there will always be a demand for smaller scale. And that's when you get to, storytelling, driving experience through aroma, really understanding the plant in different ways and meeting different consumer or patient needs. So I think this is a massive world. I do expect that larger players, because there's so much economic opportunity, will come in and they'll play, and they will, compete the way they do in any other sector of the world. But that doesn't mean that the small guys will be completely shut out. I think there's space for them as well.
All right. Well, you've had a great success as a business person. Okay. You've done a lot of different things. You've worn a lot of hats.
Yes.
What is the biggest challenge as a leader, a CEO of a major company that you have? What is your biggest challenge that you face almost on a daily, if not quarterly basis, when you have to have your reports ready? But I mean, what is the biggest challenge you have as a leader in this world?
Sure. In this world in particular, I've worked in frontier markets for years. I lived and worked in South America for 10 years. While I was there, I worked in venture capital, investing in small companies and startups and entrepreneurs. And I also worked in wine in Argentina and Chile. And frontier markets, and cannabis is a frontier market, just the same as South America is a frontier market. These are volatile markets where there's not clear rules to the game. You're often working with regulatory, working with government, to establish those rules. And things kind of change very, very quickly. And you have to be very agile and have to pivot very quickly. And so one of the biggest challenges is when you have a team that's growing, and let's say you're above 100 or a couple hundred employees, is communicating and aligning people as things change. Because what we all understood yesterday might have changed overnight. And how do you align with a group that's, it's not 10 people who can come into a conference room and have a conversation with? That's easy to communicate to. But as the group gets bigger, it's really hard to get that message through in terms of how we are going to pivot or adjust to the new reality that didn't exist but for 24 hours. Right. So it's always communications and alignment.
There you go. And adapt and improvise, right? Because you can't make the plan because life happens, I guess, right? Daniel Cook, I could talk to you for a long time, and we, among other reasons. But is there one, how do people, you have a website, so we want them to go to the website and check it out. Go ahead, give yourself a plug where you find you and all this. Go ahead.
Terpenes.com is the website, and you can find some of the latest research or products or initiatives we're working on over on our LinkedIn page for True Terpenes.
There you go. And LinkedIn is where the business world is, and it's always my first go-to place when I need to find out somebody who is in the business world. You know what frustrates me though, when you go into LinkedIn, right, and you can't find somebody is not on it. Where do you go from there, right? I mean, you can Google forever, right? But anyway, that's my deal. Daniel Cook, thank you so much for spending some time with me, enlightening me, educating me a little bit, and I loved throwing out some ideas for you. I tend to have that kind of style, and I appreciate you spending the time here.
Thanks, Jimmy. I enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
All right. For Daniel Cook, I'm Jimmy Young. That's been another edition of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast, and we will have more in the future.
Your cannabis business could be overpaying by hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal income taxes because of one simple assumption that you're making about your accountant. A dispensary owner in Colorado called me frustrated as hell. He'd been working with the same accountant for 3 years. His accountant said, "What's 471C?" Here's what the ignorance of that accountant was costing this business owner: $180,000 every single year for 3 years. 471C has been around since 2017. We're talking about an 8-year-old tax provision that many cannabis CPAs don't fully understand. 471C is one of the most complex and highly debated tax strategies in the cannabis industry. If you want to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, I'm offering free 471C reviews this month. Link in the description.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.